recording.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little bit of personal history before I get started. I literally grew up in the shadow of the Holocaust. I'm older than I look. I'm 60. I'm going to be 63. And I grew up with family. I had family who had been killed in the camps. I grew up with family and friends who were survivors of the camps. And I grew up with the children of family and friends who were survivors of the camps. So anti-Semitism is a little more personal to me on that basis. So I decided, since we have the more extensive class of the history of anti-Semitism happening later today, I'm going to make this a little bit more of my focus, and we're going to do a little bit of discussion. And I have some actually rather shocking numbers that just came up in an article I read recently from the New York Times. And it was actually devastating to me to find this. But of people under the age of 40, over 28% don't believe the Holocaust ever happened. 30% who acknowledge that the Holocaust happened believe that 2 million or less Jews were actually killed. This is devastating to hear. And of those ones that believe that 2 million or less Jews were killed, they also don't believe that Roma, what were called gypsies back then, were killed in the camps. They don't believe that gays were killed in the camps, and they don't believe that those with disabilities were killed in the camps. And I saw a huge why come up in the chat. This is because it's not being taught in the schools anymore. When I was in school, it's not being taught in the schools. They're glossing over the history of the Holocaust in the schools. My children, who are in their 30s now, got very limited education on the Holocaust. And even when you go to the Holocaust museums, the Shoah Foundation museums, people walk through there and go, this didn't really happen. This is all made up. And I see it happen quite often. By the way, the other part that I was going to say when I mentioned growing up with survivors, a very dear family friend and his wife were big shots, machers in the Shoah Foundation. Fred and Ella Jackson were part of my life for as long as I could remember. From the time that they came to the United States, they actually spent some time living with our family until they could get their own home. So, but as I said, I grew up with these stories. And this is why the history of anti-Semitism is so important to me. Excuse me. I am going to touch a little bit on how far back, because people are shocked by it. Anti-Semitism actually goes back to about 300 BCE. So literally about almost as long as the Jewish people have been in existence, there's been a history of anti-Semitism. Not all of it has been as adverse as what we see and as what we're seeing now. Some of it was more putting us into shtetls, or I'm losing the word for it, I apologize. Smaller communities, ghettos is the word I was looking for, thank you. And are being isolated. Some of it came down to our having to identify ourselves by our clothing. The yellow stars that we were forced into by Hitler was not something new. There was a point in time where Jewish men had to wear yellow cone-shaped hats. There was a point in time where we had to wear a yellow circle on our clothing, certain belts to identify ourselves in Spain. So these are all things that have happened throughout history. One of the worst things prior to the Holocaust, obviously, was the Inquisition, which, that went on for close to 300 years between Spain and then when it moved to South America. But there have always been incidents. There are tales of Jews being blamed for killing children and using their blood in matzah for Passover and being arrested for this, or for children disappearing and the Jews being blamed for this disappearance. Thank you, blood libel. I lost the word. I apologize. My pain level is up today, so if I seem to be losing words, that's why. And again, these will be discussed more thoroughly later today, but I wanted to open this more for discussion today, since there is going to be a more extensive class. So people who want to ask questions, the only thing that we are not discussing the Hamas-Israel conflict right now. So please, you're welcome to open your mics, and we're going to open this up for discussion.
Okay. Do you want me to unmute you all or individually? If anybody's having a problem, raise your hand. I can help you.
Individually, please.
Okay, sounds good.
So there's a lot of comments there. I got to put my glasses on so I can read them. I apologize. I'm going to catch up on those.
Going back to close to the beginning, can you tell us more about the diaspora?
In what aspect are you asking about the diaspora?
How did it lead to the later problems that Jews had all over the world?
Basically, when we started dispersing, a lot of people took, I don't want to say offense, but we were blamed because we were forced into becoming moneylenders. It was one of the few jobs, even though it's not something that technically we're not supposed to be doing, but it was one of the few jobs that became acceptable for us. We became the goldsmiths, we became the moneylenders. And even though it's a job that we were forced into, people took offense to us having the money and being the ones who were in control of it. So that caused a lot of problems for us later. And yes, resisting assimilation. It's not so much resisting assimilation as we were trying to keep our faith without being forced into other faiths. And yes, blood trial, every time you turn around, blood libel keeps coming up. It's nothing new. You hear about it. I heard about it as a child. The first time I went to a school that was not primarily Jewish, the first time I had contact with kids that were not Jewish, that was one of the first things I heard. Oh, you killed Christ. You used children's blood to make Passover matzah. And I about freaked hearing that. So, okay, question. Sorry, I've got to pull that up. Do good research about how people were marked. There is actually a wonderful book, and I will post it on Facebook. There's actually a Jewish studies group in Anstiora that you are all welcome to join. There is a book on the history of anti-Semitism that I am more than happy to post, and it does talk about the clothing and the labeling the clothing. Speaking of which, I was asked to advertise. I guess that's a good word for it. In Anstiora, our Minister of Arts and Sciences has started multiple diverse cultural groups. One of which is a Jewish persona. Well, actually, I started the Jewish persona and Jewish cultural studies group. All of you are welcome to join us. It's not like the Jews in the SCA. We're not there to complain about being mistreated in the SCA. We're actually a research study group. And we're trying to get other kingdoms to start similar groups, but feel free to reach out and join us. We also have a Roma cultural group. We have a Sicilian cultural group, an Indigenous studies group, and I believe a Middle Eastern dance group. But you're welcome to join us. Talk to your MOAS about starting one local for you. But until that can happen, come in and join us. We're doing studies. Reach out to me on Facebook. It's under my name, and I'll get you hooked up into it. Since I can't, I'm on my tablet right now, so I can't grab that link. And please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions.
So my question is, and sorry, I don't have headphones on. So I am not of Jewish heritage. I'm actually actively wanting to convert. So I'm trying to do this. I'm trying to create a Jewish persona the right way and being very sensitive. So one of the questions that I have is that I know that there are period depictions of these garments or badges or stuff that Jewish people would have worn in period. My question is, should I be putting that on my garb? And if so, in what way? How do I do it in a way that is going to, one, be a possible teaching point, but also be respectful to the Jewish community as a whole?
One thing that Jewish women wore, and that was throughout period, is when we wore a veil. And I need to make one for myself because I hate wearing veils. Absolutely despise it. But there is it's approximately a 2-inch band of blue around the edge of the veil, on the white veil. And that's something that the Jewish women wore, and it identified us. But you would not normally wear like the gold ring on your clothing. That was mostly for men. And yes, I saw the question about the Roma group. I'll be happy to post that as well.
I think my question is more, if someone calls me out of, you're not Jewish by heritage, why are you doing this? How do I deal with that in a way so that way I'm, like I said, my biggest concern is I want to make sure I'm always being respectful and I am not treading where I shouldn't be treading.
It's part of your persona. It's okay. Your responsibility. It's part of my persona.
Okay. Thank you.
And I saw something about yellow veil. I didn't see. Sorry. Yes.
Pardon me. Sorry. I was going to say I have a question, but my birds are wanting to join in because I'm talking, so I'm sorry about that. I can repeat it in the chat, but I am a scribe and I recently have gotten into micrography, the very, very intricate, oh my God, it blows me away, that Jewish scribes did. Now, there's obviously a lot of cultural transmission and the like, where it also developed in other cultures. And I've been started teaching and telling other people about it, but I'm hesitant because it was originally a Jewish practice and I'm not using, any sacred images. I'm using silly ones of like grotesqueries, even though they were originally used in prayer books. And I'm very clear about this is how they were used in period. This is very sacred to them, in this purposes and in this practice, just like most scribal practices were to most cultures. And so I was wondering if that's something I should stop doing or if there's some other attention I should bring to it.
The way that you're describing it, you're using it as a part of your SCA studies. Are you using Hebrew as well, or just the designs?
It's the designs that I have found that are the most intricate are in Hebrew. I am not teaching Hebrew. I am very forthright in saying I speak or read it, but I am pointing people towards Dr. Ruth Halperin, who's like the world's foremost expert on it, who is Jewish and obviously knows her stuff and even goes into how they did it. So I'm coming at it more from a technique perspective and how they used it in period, rather than go out and start copying. I can spell it, but I can't pronounce it. These prayers from these festival prayer books.
Okay,
If
that
makes any
was
sense.
the question. If you're using the prayers, no, you shouldn't be doing it.
No,
Somebody just-
definitely not.
But if you're just doing the imagery, that's fine. But doing the prayers, no, you should not be.
But obviously saying this was how they used it and why it was important is a separate, is part of that. So that way it's the context, if that makes any sense.
Correct. You're just using the imagery, blah, 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 blah. Sorry about that. You're just using the imagery without utilizing the prayer. And so that's fine. Just acknowledge that the imagery came from a specific prayer. Yeah. Any other questions? I see something coming up. I'm trying to bounce back and forth between this, and I do apologize. Oh, don't worry. We love your emotional support, cockatiels. I like the bird sounds. So, as I said, I knew this was going to be kept short because I did change my focus. I will post on Facebook, sync up with me on Facebook or catch my name on Facebook, and I will post the links to our groups, the Roma group, the Jewish Cultural Studies. It's probably going to be going through a name change right now. It's Jewish Personas of Anstiora and Vinheim, but we're probably going to change that because we do want people to understand that it is a research group as opposed to just being a social hangout. We do ask people to participate in research. In character, do I have my character for being a Jewish. Mine's a little unusual. I am a 12th century Persian Jew. I do wear Persian garb. I generally do wear a Star of David, but that's just me. But my persona is kind of strange because I have two personas that alternate. My persona story, and I've been playing for a long time, is that my persona, my Hadassah, was stolen by slave traders. And then my husband, who was on um, crusade, he just yelled from the other room, stole me from the slave traders and took me back to Ireland with him. So I actually also have a Celtic name that I alternate between because the story between our personas was that his family asked me to take on a Celtic name. So I actually alternate between the two. So it's a little different for me. But like I said, I've been really bad about not wearing a veil. I should wear one. I hate having anything on my head. Once I get one made, I will be wearing one. So mine's a little bit different. And let's see, famous interest. Okay. Yeah, I can tell you about that. I actually used to live in Caid. And that incident we refer to as Trimgate, and it had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. I actually know them very well. The trim itself was done as Viking trim. It was approved by the College of Heralds. It was approved by the prior royals. The person who raised the stink of it, about it, I should say, was very proud of herself for getting them removed from the throne. She was born into a Jewish home, is not a practicing Jew in any way. As a matter of fact, it makes a big deal about the fact that she is not a practicing Jew and is a pagan. She did it primarily to cause problems. If you saw the trim, because it was not done in black, red, and white, which is the Nazi symbol, it was done in oranges, yellows, and reds, and I believe blues and greens. You could not even see the fact that it had a broken cross on it. It was not a swastika. And I will tell you something, as somebody who's a Jew and as somebody who grew up with family that had been in the concentration, I was not in the least offended by it, because I believe culturally we should be taking that symbol back, especially with all the people that we have who have Viking personas. And this has been my belief all along as far as that particular case went.
Somebody brought up a question, and I actually would like to have it, so I'm going to repeat it. Can you give us some examples of how anti-Semitism, excuse me, presents itself within the SCA?
Actually, yes, I can. One of the biggest issues that I've seen is that, and there really is no excuse for it, because every secular calendar I've ever seen has the high holy days marked on it. But there have been multiple instances of major events, crown tournaments, and other major events being held on the high holy days. And there's really no reason for it. All you have to do is look at a calendar and say, oh, gee, this is Rosh Hashanah this Saturday. This is Yom Kippur this Saturday. We can schedule this major tournament the week before or the week after. And this is something that should and can be taken care of quite easily. I've run into issues with people, actually before I developed my Jewish persona. When I first started playing, having a Jewish persona was not acceptable. And it took, God, I was playing for over 20 years before it became acceptable to have a Jewish persona. And it wasn't until the Middle Eastern dance community really got big that being allowed to do that became acceptable. I've been playing since 1978. So
To follow up that, and please understand, I am stating this more as devil's advocate, not because I agree with this thinking. My guess is September Crown, which is almost always, at least here in Ontario, is Labor Day weekend. It's always that weekend. If those two can overlap, I can see that for the Crown being a very sticky point, because it's usually a longer event because it's Labor Day weekend. I can see where for that, like that specific event, they may not move it. I agree though with you that, yeah, let's think about these things. So like I said, devil's advocate, I don't truly agree with it, but I can understand logistically why for like that specific event they wouldn't do it. But that is a really good point.
I look at it this way. We don't schedule events for Christmas. We very rarely schedule events for Easter. Some groups seem to go out of their way to schedule events for the equinoxes and solstices and quarter days.
Exactly.
You know,
As a matter of fact, you know,
I've
in
never seen groups avoiding Ramadan.
in Onstera, I mean, we have Candlemas, we have Yule, we have uh what is it? Summer solstice that they have an event for. And I mean, these are specifically pagan events or pagan holidays that they actually celebrate. And yet we're not supposed to in the SCA have religious themed events.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would
And
argue that perhaps Midsummer is less a religious themed event than a astronomical fact, and it was a day that was celebrated throughout period, not necessarily with pagan connotation.
Mhm.
But that's just me.
And I also saw the thing about the use of the churches. For some people, yes, it is uncomfortable, and I do agree about the thing. You know, for those people who are religious Jews, going to an event on Saturdays. I mean, unless you arrive before Shabbat and you're there on site already, it's difficult. Another discussion that we had, because I am a feast steward for an event coming up the end of February, Kashrut, and I had to explain to the feast stewards, no, we cannot do a kosher. We cannot do kosher cooking. We cannot do true halal or true kosher, because we're using dishes, pots, and pans that have been used to cook other foods. They can be halal friendly and kosher friendly, but they will not be true kosher or true halal. And I had to explain this to them. Well, even if it's vegetarian, no, even if it's vegetarian, it is still not true kosher or true halal. And you can't use the communal kitchen, correct. But you can be kosher friendly or kosher or halal friendly. And having to explain that, and people don't understand it.
I do want to, I know I mentioned this in the chat, and I just kind of want to bring it forward that there was a discussion about, maybe look at a calendar and look at what holidays, not just Jewish holidays, are coming up when you schedule something, not to never overschedule, but to like maybe be able to not overschedule it some of the time. And the amount of pushback that the Jews got in that DEIB unofficial space was truly horrific. And I think it tells us something about the attitude that the non-Jewish majority has towards Jews in the SCA, but also in society, which is we tolerate you if you don't make noise. We tolerate you so long as you don't ask anything of us. We're fine with you so long as this is just, an asterisk. You don't have to think about how your Jewishness comes with needs, how you have to be subordinate to the needs of the majority. And I wanted to kind of bring that forward verbally and put it in front of everybody. When those of us who are not Jewish, for example, are trying to be better allies to any minority, including but not limited to Jews, we have to think about those kinds of inchoate emotional responses, because the amount of pearl clutching that was in there, boy, did it make me feel significantly less welcome in the SCA. And it made me feel less welcome than any amount of stupid Soros meme posting. You take a screenshot of that, you send it to your seneschal. This is a lot more insidious, and it's a lot harder to find in yourself, and it's a lot harder to combat. And I just wanted to put that in front of everybody.
Exactly. And, and I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for 45 years. And for those who are relative newcomers, I'll say, to the SCA, it's always been there. It's been in the background. I've dealt with the neo-Nazis in the SCA. I've dealt with the overt Nazism in the SCA. And for the most part, you don't see as much of it, but there's that, well, you're still not important issue, dealing with the majority of court events being held in churches. Which, I mean, I'm not uncomfortable. It doesn't make me uncomfortable, but there are people that it makes very uncomfortable. And I realize we can't use synagogues because the majority of court events are held on Saturdays. But there are other places that the events can be held, but churches are convenient. And it's not taken into consideration. Yes, and cheap is a good word for it. But there are so many things that need to be done to bring the Jewish community into view, that aren't being done. I have been told recently in a DEIB conversation online that the only people that matter are the ones that wave the pretty colored flags and the POC. And they forget that, guess what? Jews until the 60s were not considered to be white. So, you know, these are also things that, you know, we're fighting as well.
I think it's important to kind of point out that I think churches are just kind of like a fact, you know, like they are an ideal meeting space for a lot of SCA events. I think it's more an issue of the empathy in relation to it, the willingness to basically kind of check in on Jewish members when things are happening in churches, especially if the church is like very very overtly decorated, if that makes sense. To just like have the empathy to like take a moment, be like, hey, you doing okay? Do a check-in, move on, just to have that empathy there on a lot of levels, I think is really more the thing. Because like I said, you're right, we're not going to get around the fact that churches are venues that we utilize, but that practice of empathy, and really just kind of generally in life, that practice of empathy is important.
And that is a big deal. And that's, you know, and that goes along with not just anti-Semitism, but homophobia. It goes along with, what's the word I want to use? People who are anti-POC. I'll use that. I know it's not the correct term, but again, I'm losing the term that I want. We have to start taking, anti-disability. Oh my God, that's one of the worst. But these are things that we have to take into consideration. This is why I did this event today. So, I think I've actually run over. No, I haven't run over my time. I think I have run over my time.
No,
No,
you have
I
another
haven't?
2
Okay.
minutes before your,
Oh, 2
your 10
minutes?
minutes, because
Yay.
you're supposed to end at 1:25, but
Okay.
I was supposed to give
So
you a
the-
warning in about 2 minutes.
Okay, so does anybody else have any comments or questions or anything of importance to share?
If
I
we
was
hit, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, you know, I'm an officer in my barony, one of two baronies in my principality, and I'm going for Baron and Baroness with my partner here soon. But that has given me, you know, cause to stop and think and like question things, like when we're planning events and being like, maybe we shouldn't have it at the Catholic Church, maybe the Unitarian Universalist, you know, as the least offensive option. I mean, I was just thinking, because when we were talking about overt decorations, and I'm thinking, you know, some have a very, very different vibe and history than others. And also for questioning like calendar dates and things like that. So thank you for, you know, at least, you know, bringing the clue by 4 upside my head.
Well, thank you. Best of luck in hopefully becoming Baroness. Um, and I appreciate everybody who showed up. Don't forget to go to the class on becoming a Jewish ally, which follows this, I believe.
Yes,
I
it
think it's
does.
right after the,
Oh,
I will be in there, so. And don't forget to attend the other class that goes more into depth on the history of anti-Semitism also. And if, like I said, I will post on Facebook the links for our cultural studies groups as well.
Thank you. That was actually what I was going to ask is, I know you said that your your slideshow went AOL, or went poof. And I was actually going to hit you up because I actually want to start working on a project of the visual anti-Semitism that happens in period. So I was thinking you probably had some places for me to start looking.
Definitely do. And I've got some good books for you to check into. And also, like I said, come to our cultural studies group. I'm also going to be teaching Yiddish in there. So,
Ooh, okay. Although I, like I said, the summer persona that I'm working on is Sephardic Jew during Golden Age.
we do have someone who's going to be teaching Ladino.
Yeah, I was gonna say
Ooh,
there's
I'm
actually
actually
some
curious.
really great Ladino resources out there.
I've seen some,
Okay.
like, okay, I need to research this because I've heard a little bit of it's gorgeous. I've never even known that that was actually a thing. Oh yeah, Sephardic. I actually, so I grew up Christian. I am wanting to try to convert, but there's things that I looking as I'm converting, I'm looking at things and going, Sephardic makes more sense in some of their traditions for me. So I kind of pull some of those things, but yeah, Ladino sounds gorgeous. The little bit that I've heard, I want to learn so much more.
Have you seen The Beauty Queen of Jerusalem
I
on
have not.
Netflix?
Oh,
So they do. There's sprinkles of Ladino in that show. Um,
doesn't that
if you
have?
have an ear for what Spanish sounds like,
I'm. Is the actress that's on there the lead one fairly popular? Red, big curly hair. I want to say she was in Goodwill Hunting.
I do not know.
Okay, I'll have to.
It's a
Yeah.
fairly recent show. It's a fairly recent
Okay.
show. Takes place in like the 20s to 30s, but the family that is focused on is Sephardic, and they speak Ladino pretty internally with each other frequently. So it's a good resource for both Hebrew and for the elements of Ladino that are included.
I will definitely look that up because I currently don't have Netflix. We're going to be getting it back here soon because Avatar: The Last Airbender. Nothing else to say.
That's important.
The question about the Crusaders, what do you mean shocked by Crusaders being everywhere? You mean the crypto Jews being Crusaders? Or are you talking about the conversos? Because there were also Jewish pirates. Your nephew might love that.
No, he was shocked at an event that there were people portraying crusaders,
Oh, okay.
and it made him uncomfortable. I am not Jewish. That side of my family is very Jewish, and that my side is not. We're just two sides of different sides of the coin. But they're my closest family. And But not being Jewish, I mean, I know that we're not supposed to have religious personas, and I would consider a crusader a religious persona, right?
I've seen plenty of religious personas.
See, I thought we weren't supposed to have them anyway. I just didn't
People
know
practice.
if that was something other Jewish people, if that made them uncomfortable, because it's not something I had considered for his comfort level, right? Like it wasn't something that I had was prepared for
I think it's
to
important.
support him, right?
I think it's important
Um,
to remember that we're not a monolith, and the levels of comfort are going to be very based on individuality. Like I'd probably be like a little side eye, but I'd also kind of most likely kind of get over that hump personally. Other people, I could see them being like, it's very personal. And that's actually where Jewish people are concerned. A lot of the things I think that people tend to believe about us as a collective is that certain concepts are universal, and in fact, they are not. And comfort level can often be one of those things. I mean, I probably wouldn't go sit next to the guy dressed as a crusader, but I wouldn't be like rude, and I would, like I said, I'd probably give a little side eye and then kind of like do my own thing with people that I like and that I trust. And, you know, I mean, I've worked at Renaissance fairs where I've played Catholic characters and had to wear a crucifix. And it wasn't great, but I was playing a role. So, which I know isn't the same thing as a persona, but still.
Well, and again, you know, like I said, I have both my Jewish persona and then I have my Irish name, and which would put me sort of in the position of being a crypto, which is something that I'm actually doing research into right now. So it's kind of fascinating.
Also, historically, religion was a major factor in people's lives in a way that we're probably not really used to it being in the modern era. Even if you're a Jew, even if you're Orthodox, because being Jewish is also a culture, it's also an ethnicity. Being Catholic is not an ethnicity, right? Like it's not quite the same thing. I don't think it's a necessarily inherently a red flag if somebody in the SCA is making the period choice and, for example, reproduces a book of hours, which is a deeply religious devotional text. But are they using the cover of religious persona play to be a dick to minorities? That's a red flag. And I think the choice of a crusader, which is somebody especially from the Jewish and Muslim point of view, this is somebody who's coming to wreak havoc and warfare and bloodshed on your doorstep in a way that it probably wasn't to the Christians in Europe. Is a choice, and it's not the only religious choice that somebody in the SCA could have made. They're not making a religious historical choice. They're making a choice that's laden with meaning. And I think we're allowed to discuss the meaning, and I think we're allowed to discuss intent versus impact. And I think that's the difference between somebody making a book of hours as a work of devotion, or somebody shouting Deus Vult on the battlefield. Just my 2 cents, my hot take. I'm only one Jew. One Jew does not speak for all Jews. I just want to chime in.
I would also, piggybacking off of that, add that the Crusaders didn't just go after Jews and Muslims, they also went over after fringe Christians. So if you were not following the Catholic Church exactly, you were persecuted just as much. There's a lot of issues with Crusader persona. It's pretty much very much elitist. I would, as a Christian, I would be kind of going, okay, why? This is really not good off.
You have to remember, they also went on crusade, not just the ones that they are referred to as crusaders, but they also went on crusade to Jerusalem for religious purposes. Right. So there's a difference between the two.
Well, look at the, sorry. Well, really quick, look at the, oops, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Look at the sack of Constantinople. I mean, really, you know, Christians sacking Christians. We're great history there. But whether if I see somebody, and I've done this, if I see somebody who's wearing a Teutonic cross or a cross of Malta or a Templar cross, I'm going to ask them, do you know what you're wearing? Do you know what, I'm not going to say, do you know what you're wearing? But I'm going to ask them about why they may be wearing that particular design.
Mm-hmm. Could I actually ask you to send the College of Heralds some of that type of thinking, because maybe these are crosses that should become restricted charges, especially if it's got that much connotation. It's whether they actually implement it or not is questionable, but if nothing else, it brings forward that thinking into the College of Heralds at the submission levels. So I would highly recommend talking to your local herald about that, or your kingdom level, whoever does submissions, please do. Because I don't know those
I
things.
think I think if someone's gonna go core, whatever their motive is, or whatever their reason for choosing that is, I think in any case, they will eventually out themselves.
Apologies. It is 1:25. The class is now ended. I am going to end the recording.